Welcome, loreheads, to another 40k video as we stare into the timeless depths of the warp, where all stories are already written. Now, witness heretical knowledge on the Alpha Legion. How do they operate in 40k in that era? After the loss in presence of both of their Primarchs, how do they stay below the radar of the larger Imperium? How do they react to the Primarchs? Let's begin. As the Inquisition worked to keep the vast majority of humanity ignorant of the truth, both about the wider galaxy and their own civilization's history, so had the Alpha Legion, over millennia, become more and more withdrawn into its own cells and warbands, guarding their true intentions even from those who shared their heritage. In the era of the Primarchs, before the heresy had begun, Alpharius Omegon had known the full extent of the Alpha Legion's operations and had coordinated it across the galaxy. When Horus had turned on his father, however, everything changed. Brother betrayed brother, and secrets that had once been kept only from outsiders were now walled away from those with whom they had once been shared. Some rumours even suggested that the twin Primarchs themselves had ended up at odds with one another, as some long-hidden difference caused their shared soul to turn against itself. Much of what the Alpha Legion had left were only rumours. Some of the Legion said Alpharius had been killed in the Battle of Pluto, others that he had been killed on Escrador. Some said one or other event had been Omegon instead. Some deliberately obtuse fools even denied that either incident had seen the end of a Primarch's life, and that either or both of the twins were still alive somewhere in the galaxy, watching and waiting or subtly guiding events in the pursuit of some great unknown grand plan. In their father's absence, the Legion had splintered, not in the manner of a shattering glass, but of a fragmentation round entering a body, each piece dug into the flesh of the Imperium, and stopping and removing one would do nothing to affect the progress of the others. That is the strength of the Alpha Legion in this era. But the splinters were, by that same token, no longer part of a unified whole. The ship, the unseen, on the other hand, was a known quantity, at least to the Alpha Legion of the area of space, designated by the Imperium as the Ultima Segmentum. It was not a ship so much as it was a conglomerate, a combination trophy heap and junkyard, built around the core of a universe-class mass conveyor, with innumerable other smaller ships now attached to it. It looked like a small space hulk, but the unseen had been constructed by the Alpha Legion, not thrown together by the whims of the warp, despite the pieces of Orc-Tau and other stranger Xenos vessels that nestled in its superstructure, alongside those made by humanity. It had long ago, by dint of some unrecorded agreement between powerful warlords, been designated as neutral ground, and not for the use of any one individual. So it was that one of the greatest strongholds of the Alpha Legion, in the records that Solomon knew of, lay within an asteroid cluster on a decades-long orbit around the parent star. It was here that the warbands gathered, on the infrequent occasions when they came together, and it was here that certain of the Alpha Legion's retainers, resources and associates remained. Within its superstructure was one of the reasons that the Alpha Legion were able to endure, that they had their own Biologis Diabolicus, Magos Khazadin Yela Magasa, who had broken from the teachings of the Omnissiah. Some 3,000 years before, Solomon had brought specimens for him to examine, Primaris specimens. The Magos was undeniably a genius, and his gene lobs in the bowels of the unseen were one of the main reasons why the Ultima Segmentum warbands were able to maintain their numbers at such viable levels. Other renegades might struggle with failing technological knowledge and ancient, irreparable equipment as they sought to induct aspirants through the harrowing procedures that all Space Marines had to endure, no matter where their loyalties lay. The Biologis Diabolicus, however, had been able to meld his knowledge of gene smithing and flash crafting, knowledge that had seen him exiled from the Adeptus Mechanicus. So it was that Solomon had been raised into the Legion's ranks, and without the corrupting effects of warp anomalies, such as those within which other renegades concealed themselves. His biology and anatomy were scarcely any different to one of his distant imperial kin. Magos Yela Magasa's sanctum had once been a ship's primary medical bay and the apothecarian, and it still contained ancient machinery which likely dated back to the Great Crusade. However, there were many other newer devices installed, few of which had ever been seen, let alone approved by either the Mechanicus or any apothecary of the Space Marines. Solomon's armour registered a drop in temperature of several degrees as soon as he entered the chamber, the result of cold bleed from the cryostore units scattered around, in which resided the various organs and implants the Biologis Diabolicus would use to usher the next generation of Alpha Legionaries into the galaxy. Most of these creatures were the work of the Magos' abominable intelligence engine. The Magos liked to keep his circuits focused on matters of biology, and so had delegated his known knowledge of machines, which was lesser, although still substantial, to his spider-legged automaton, which spoke in a static-edged version of the Magos' own voice. Through looking at the Primarchs, the Magos sees that the creation of these Marines could not have been officially sanctioned. Solomon rubbed his chin, and the wheels of his mind began to spin in new directions. Perhaps no existing chapter was influenced to incorporate these changes. The Magos' body did not move, but his head rotated 180 degrees to look at Solomon. "A new founding then, perhaps," Solomon replied. It's at this point that Solomon receives new information. It was from one of the Serpent's Teeth agents, a mid-ranking Imperial official on the world of Valise. All the correct ciphers, codes and clearances were in place. But when Solomon had finished reading it, he went back and checked again. So strange, so unlikely was the message he received. It said, "Robuti Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, is back." Solomon, being sharp, links this to the Primarch that's been dissected, and he reacts by calling the warbands that he can to the ship, the Unseen. And many did come, which surprised him. The Alpha Legion was, by its nature, independently minded. They had no Primarch, no first captain, no chapter master. Nor did they have a homeworld. The Unseen was the closest thing to a base of operations, at least in the Ultima Segmentum. The very fluidity of a command structure that made them so adaptable also meant that a call such as the one he had put out held no more authority than that which the recipients chose to give it. The Legion was splintered into warbands and warbands into cells, and so on. How could there be any single authority in such a situation? Two Alpha Legion operatives might pass each other on a street, wearing identifying marks without blinking, for those marks would have been set by groups that had no knowledge of each other. Solomon was certain that Legion factors had fought each other before, each group pretending to be Imperial loyalists, and assuming their counterparts were the real thing. And other things throughout the novel we see from the Alpha Legion are the type of allies they have. They work with normal humans as operatives, fighting alongside them, using them as agents in roles within the Astra Militarum. Solomon, who aspires to be a Harrow Master, a leader amongst the Alpha Legions, for example, fights alongside a human female psyker who came over from the Loyalist side. Another interesting wrinkle within the Legion is the chaos level of the Legion. Most don't have the marks of chaos. Most are just still the more pure Marines, as the Emperor initially envisaged them. Some are chaos and divided in terms of who they're allied to, others can't, and others still only use chaos to aid their cause. Solomon has a demon, for example, that he commands within his suit, and during the novel he also calls upon forces from the Dark Mechanicum to help fight off a Titan on a chaos world. All of these allies, human and chaos, are temporary because those factions need each other until they don't. And through these allies he gains the Pale Spear, a weapon of the Alpha Legion's Primarch. And with that, and his performance, his ranks within the leadership of the Alpha Legion changes. Many of the bands agree to fight under him, and he declares them a Ghost Legion, and that he is their new leader, the Harrow Master. And that is where we end today's video. Do you like the ship The Unseen? I'd like to see more sort of stealth technology on it. That would have been pretty interesting. And do you like how the Alpha Legion operates as the Ghost Legion in the 40k setting? Comment down below.